I came back from 3 years overseas to find some woman had stolen my family's $250,000 lakefront property, installed a $2,000 electronic gate, and was charging my elderly neighbors $50 each just to visit their own grandkids at the lake. This lunatic had turned my grandfather's simple dirt road into Willowbrook Estates, complete with fake stone pillars and security cameras pointing directly at my cabin windows. When I pulled up in my dusty pickup, this robotic voice started demanding a resident access code, like I'm some common criminal. Then here she comes, tearing down the hill in her golf cart, designer sunglasses bouncing, screaming, "Private property, you're trespassing on my land." I rolled down my window real calm and held up my property deed, the one with my grandfather's signature from 1987, back when this witch was probably still learning to tie her shoes. Her face went from fake sweet smile to pure terror, because she knew exactly what was coming next. What would you do if someone tried to steal your family land while you were defending our country? Drop a comment from whatever state you're watching from. Let me back up and tell you how this whole mess started. My name's Marcus Brennan, and I'm a 34-year-old Army engineer who just finished a 3-year rotation overseas. While I was dodging IEDs in Afghanistan, this woman, Deirdre Hutchinson, was busy executing the most audacious land theft I've ever witnessed. My grandfather bought this 40-acre slice of paradise back in 1987 for $12,000. You could still smell the pine sap from fresh-cut logs when he signed that deed. $12,000 for prime lakefront property with 800 feet of pristine Lake Thornton shoreline, back when you could actually afford the American dream without selling a kidney. Grandpa built our family cabin with his own hands. You could still see his pencil marks on the support beams. Every summer reunion, every 4th of July, every Christmas morning for 30-plus years, that place echoed with the sound of kids laughing and adults arguing about who caught the biggest walleye. The texture of those weathered deck railings, worn smooth by 3 generations of hands, told our whole family story. When Grandpa passed during my deployment, he left me everything. The will was ironclad, the deed was bulletproof, and I had every intention of retiring there after my service. Problem was, I couldn't exactly abandon my unit to fly home and guard the property while tracking down insurgents in the Afghan mountains. Enter our villain, Deirdre Hutchinson, 52, recently divorced with more anger than a hornet's nest in a hurricane. She'd fled Minneapolis after her husband ditched her for his dental hygienist, because apparently even root canals were more appealing than another evening with Deirdre. She rolled into Lake Thornton with her insurance settlement money and a mission to civilize us backwards rural folk. Deirdre bought the ugliest house in 3 counties. This concrete monstrosity that looked like a suburban fortress had mated with a shopping mall. The thing squatted on an artificial hill like a giant middle finger pointed at every modest cabin that had been there for decades. Within 6 months, the smell of her imported Kentucky bluegrass fertilizer was choking out the natural wildflowers that had grown there since the glaciers melted. Now, Lake Thornton had always been the kind of place where neighbors helped neighbors. If your dock needed repairs, 3 guys showed up with beer and power tools. If someone's septic backed up, everybody kicked in $20. Nobody charged fees, nobody demanded permits, and nobody appointed themselves supreme dictator of everyone else's business. But Deirdre had different plans. She started her reign of terror with voluntary road maintenance fees, even though County Road 47B had been county maintained since Carter was president. The crunch of gravel under her designer SUV became the neighborhood's new alarm clock as she patrolled her territory every morning at dawn, taking notes on who needed to be corrected. Then came the masterstroke of her criminal enterprise. While I was serving my country and trusting that American property rights still meant something, Deirdre convinced some brain-dead county clerk to reclassify our family's access road as her private community entrance. She installed that $2,000 electronic monstrosity exactly where my property line met the county road. Suddenly, the path my grandfather had used for 35 years became the exclusive entrance to her fake Willowbrook Estates empire. She started charging access fees to neighbors who'd lived there longer than she'd been potty trained. But here's the part that'll make your blood boil. She told everyone I'd been killed overseas. Actually convinced my neighbors that my property was abandoned and she was temporarily managing the estate. She gave tours to potential buyers, pointing out where they could subdivide my land for maximum profit. When I finally drove up to that electronic gate, I was expecting to find my cabin exactly as Grandpa left it, dusty but intact, waiting for me to start the next chapter. Instead, I discovered she'd changed the locks, moved all my family photos to the tool shed, and installed security cameras pointed directly through the windows like she was running surveillance on a drug house. This woman had spent 3 years systematically stealing my family's legacy, and she genuinely believed she'd gotten away with the perfect crime. She was about to discover that screwing with a combat engineer's inheritance is the kind of mistake you only make once. 3 days after I discovered my ransacked cabin, a certified letter showed up in my mailbox. Well, what used to be my mailbox before Deirdre replaced it with some fancy brass thing labeled Willowbrook Estates Management Office. The envelope was thick, official-looking, and reeked of that cheap perfume she probably bathed in every morning. Inside was 8 pages of pure legal fiction that would have made a Hollywood screenwriter jealous. Deirdre was demanding immediate payment of $3,600 in accumulated community assessments, plus a $500 emergency gate installation fee, plus another $200 for a compliance inspection of my unauthorized structures. She was claiming authority under the Minnesota Planned Community Act, which is a real law, by the way, but she was applying it like a toddler trying to use a chainsaw to cut birthday cake. The letter threatened to place a lien on my property for accumulated violations and gave me exactly 10 days to remedy all outstanding issues or face legal action. The itemized list was my favorite part. Apparently, my grandfather's tool shed was an unauthorized outbuilding. His compost pile was an environmental hazard. And get this, she was fining me $50 for every month I hadn't paid dues to an HOA that didn't exist when I left for deployment. Now, most people would have panicked, maybe hired an expensive lawyer, definitely lost some sleep. But here's the thing about military training. It teaches you to gather intelligence before you react. So instead of getting mad, I got curious. I spent the next week at the county courthouse, and let me tell you, those dusty record books told a story that would have made Deirdre wet herself if she knew what I was finding. The smell of old paper and musty filing cabinets in that courthouse basement became oddly comforting as I pieced together her web of lies. Turns out, our self-appointed community dictator had been playing fast and loose with the truth from day one. She'd never filed the proper HOA formation documents with the state. You can't just declare yourself the president of something that doesn't legally exist. It's like claiming you're the mayor of Atlantis and demanding tribute from the fish. That road reclassification she'd pulled off? Completely improper. The county engineer sheepishly admitted they'd changed the designation based on her community development application without the required public notice period. Basically, she'd slipped it past them while everyone was looking the other way, like a pickpocket at a county fair. But here's where it gets really interesting. I dug into Deirdre's own property records and found out why she was so desperate to control everything around her. Remember that nasty divorce I mentioned? Well, her settlement agreement required her to maintain her property value above $400,000 to keep receiving alimony payments. If the value dropped below that threshold, her ex-husband could stop the monthly checks that were keeping her designer lifestyle afloat. I remembered reading somewhere that lakefront access rights can boost surrounding property values by 15 to 30%. Suddenly, Deirdre's obsession with my shoreline made perfect sense. She didn't just want control, she needed it to avoid financial ruin. When someone's fighting this dirty over property rights, there's usually money desperation driving their crazy behavior. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. She'd been collecting road maintenance fees from 7 different families, totaling about $2,100 per month. But guess what? No maintenance account existed. No receipts, no contractor payments, no nothing. She was running a straight-up embezzlement operation disguised as community management. Then I started talking to the neighbors individually, armed with my grandmother's chocolate chip cookie recipe as a conversation starter. That's when the real picture emerged. Deirdre had convinced elderly Gladys Morrison that I'd been killed in action and my property would be sold at auction. She'd told Mike Patterson, who runs the local bait shop, that I'd abandoned the land and it would become a public park. But here's what really knocked me sideways. When I knocked on Gladys's door with a plate of those cookies, she started crying and handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a contract where Deirdre had actually tried to buy my property deed from the probate court for $15,000, claiming to be a concerned community member, protecting the area from undesirable development. The texture of those legal papers felt different in my hands, cheaper, newer than the authentic documents I'd grown up seeing. Deirdre had gotten so confident in her scam that she'd started creating fake paperwork, probably printed on her home computer with templates downloaded from the internet. The old lady had been so confused by all of Deirdre's legal-sounding nonsense that she'd almost signed over a power of attorney, thinking she was helping settle my estate. Only thing that stopped her was her grandson, a paralegal in Duluth, who recognized the scam for what it was. When I got home that evening, I found new surprises waiting. Deirdre had installed bright orange, private property no trespassing signs on trees throughout my land, not just near the road. Deep into the property, some nailed right into the oak tree where my dad had built my childhood treehouse. Her security cameras had multiplied like rabbits, now pointing at every window of my cabin like I was running some kind of criminal enterprise. The final insult? She'd filed a police report claiming I'd threatened her with violence. Complete fabrication, since our only interaction had been me showing her my deed through my truck window. Time to show her what a real military campaign looked like. If I thought Deirdre was done with her amateur hour intimidation tactics, I was dead wrong. This woman had apparently binged every season of Real Housewives and decided to weaponize social media like a suburban terrorist. 3 days after my courthouse expedition, I woke up to 17 notifications on my phone. Deirdre had created the Willowbrook Estates Community Facebook group and tagged me in a post that made my blood pressure spike faster than a rocket launch. The post featured a grainy screenshot from her security cameras, cleverly edited to make me look like I was aggressively charging her gate instead of simply driving up my own driveway. The caption read, "Urgent safety alert. Unstable individual with military training has been repeatedly threatening peaceful families. Claims property rights, but exhibits violent tendencies. Police have been notified. Avoid at all costs." Within 6 hours, she had 43 comments from people I'd never met, all expressing grave concern about the dangerous veteran and offering to help protect our children. The smell of fresh coffee couldn't calm my nerves as I scrolled through her orchestrated character assassination, complete with crying face emojis and American flag reactions dripping with fake patriotism. But here's something I learned during financial briefings in the Army. When someone's running a con game, they always get sloppy when they think they're winning. While Deirdre was busy playing social media dictator, I was setting up my own intelligence operation. I installed trail cameras throughout my property and within 48 hours had footage that would have made a federal prosecutor drool. Deirdre's landscaping crew was dumping yard waste directly onto my shoreline, treating the abandoned property like their personal landfill. Even better, I caught her red-handed charging boat launch fees to public fishermen, $20 per boat for access to what had always been free public waters. The sound of cash registers must have been deafening in her head because she was literally monetizing every square inch of lakefront she could control. Through my telephoto lens, I watched her set up a folding table with a hand-painted sign, "Day use fee $20 per boat, Environmental Protection Fund." Environmental Protection Fund, my ass. That money was going straight into her coach purse to fund her alimony lifestyle. Then I discovered the real scope of her financial fraud. She'd been billing neighbors for professional property management services, totaling $12,000 over the past year, official-looking invoices for legal consultation, environmental impact assessments, and community development planning. In reality, she'd blown that money on her own landscaping improvements. Her Facebook posts literally showed off the new gazebo and imported Japanese maples she'd bought with stolen neighbor fees. Here's the gut punch. 3 families were now behind on their mortgages because of her fake assessments. Mike Patterson had taken a second loan on his bait shop to cover her made-up emergency gate maintenance fees. Elderly Gladys Morrison was eating rice and beans for dinner, trying to scrape together money for Deirdre's imaginary septic compliance penalties. That's when I realized this wasn't just property theft anymore. This psychopath was financially destroying an entire community with her elaborate con game. My counterpunch started with some old-fashioned military intelligence gathering. I began visiting the younger neighbors, the ones who'd moved up from Minneapolis but weren't completely hypnotized by Deirdre's suburban princess routine. Jackpot. Sarah and Tom Justice, both attorneys with a weekend cabin 2 lots over, had been quietly researching HOA law for months and couldn't find any legal basis for Deirdre's operations. They'd been afraid to speak up because she'd threatened to sue them for undermining community stability and property values. Mike Patterson pulled me aside at his bait shop, the smell of minnow tanks, and old wood creating that familiar North Country atmosphere, and whispered that his revenue had dropped 40% since Deirdre's gate installation. Weekend fishermen from the cities were hitting other lakes rather than deal with her interrogations and extortion fees. But here's where it gets really good. The county had started fielding complaints about restricted public lake access. Charging fees for public waters access is about as legal as selling tickets to breathe air. County Commissioner Janet Holloway, facing re-election in 6 months, suddenly became very motivated to resolve community access issues before voters had their say. The mini twist that changed everything happened when I was reviewing Deirdre's own property taxes online. Her divorce settlement required maintaining property value above $400,000 for continued alimony, and lakefront access rights typically boost values by 20 to 30%. She wasn't just stealing my land for power, she was stealing it to avoid poverty. But Deirdre wasn't done escalating. When I got home that evening, her harassment had gone full psycho. Motion-activated floodlights now blasted my cabin windows every time a leaf moved. The acrid smell of herbicide was drifting across my property line, creating brown death spots in my grandfather's wildflower meadow. She was literally trying to poison my family's legacy while robbing my neighbors blind. Time to stop playing defense and launch my own offensive campaign. This suburban dictator was about to learn what happens when you mess with someone who actually knows how to fight. Just when I thought Deirdre had reached peak crazy, she decided to go nuclear. Apparently, my little intelligence-gathering mission had rattled her cage because she escalated from petty harassment to full-blown scorched earth warfare. I woke up Tuesday morning to find a certified letter from Hutchinson Property Management, LLC, a company that existed only in Deirdre's fantasy world, claiming she'd filed a formal lien against my property for $8,900 in accumulated community violations and unpaid assessments. The document looked official enough to fool most people, complete with fake notary stamps and legal-sounding references to Minnesota Statute 515B.3-116, but that was just the appetizer. 2 hours later, I got a call from the state environmental agency. Some concerned citizen had reported my grandfather's septic system as an illegal environmental hazard threatening groundwater contamination. Emergency site inspection scheduled within 48 hours, potential $10,000 in fines if violations were found. Then came the phone call that made me see red. My commanding officer from Fort Bragg, confused and concerned. Apparently, some woman named Deirdre Hutchinson had contacted the base claiming I was exhibiting severe PTSD symptoms and making violent threats against innocent families. She'd requested an immediate welfare check and suggested I needed urgent psychiatric intervention before someone gets seriously hurt. Let me be crystal clear. Weaponizing veteran mental health stigma to destroy someone's reputation is lower than snake shit in a wagon rut. This woman was literally trying to end my military career and civilian future with completely fabricated psychiatric accusations. But here's what our suburban dictator didn't understand. The Army doesn't play games when civilians make false reports about their soldiers. My CO immediately connected me with the base JAG office, and Captain Rodriguez was absolutely livid about the fraudulent claims. Military lawyers have zero tolerance for people who exploit veteran mental health stereotypes for personal warfare. While Deirdre was busy playing amateur psychologist, I was assembling my own professional strike team. Sarah Justice, my attorney neighbor who'd been quietly researching Deirdre's illegal operations, was practically salivating at the chance to destroy our neighborhood tyrant in court. The smell of fresh brewed coffee and legal briefs filled Sarah's home office as she explained exactly how screwed Deirdre had made herself. Turns out filing a fraudulent lien isn't just annoying paperwork. It's a felony in Minnesota. I'd learned during a real estate seminar back at Fort Bragg that anyone can file a lien. But if it's bogus, you can sue for damages plus attorney fees, and the penalties can be absolutely brutal. Sarah also requested a formal county investigation of the road access manipulation. Changing road designations without proper public notice isn't just bureaucratic incompetence. It violates state transparency laws and could cost the county federal funding. The county engineer was suddenly very motivated to fix his oversight. My military intelligence training kicked in as I filed a state revenue complaint about Deirdre's unlicensed property management business. She owed $23,000 in business taxes on those community fees, and operating without proper licensing carries penalties up to $10,000 per violation. She'd been running her little criminal empire for 2 years. The mini twist that blew everything wide open came when the state environmental inspector arrived. Professional guy, 20 years experience, and he took one look at my grandfather's septic installation and started chuckling. "Son," he said, the sound of his clipboard pages flipping in the morning breeze, "this system is grandfathered under 1960s regulations and probably cleaner than most modern installations. Whoever reported this either knows nothing about septic systems or was deliberately wasting state resources." He spent 30 minutes documenting that my system wasn't just legal, It was actually superior to current code requirements. Then he looked me straight in the eye and said filing false environmental reports was a state crime with serious penalties. When I mentioned my neighbor's unusual interest in my property's environmental compliance, he made some very interesting notes in his official report. The community momentum exploded when the local newspaper picked up the story. Veteran returns home to find property under siege hit the front page of the Lake County Gazette, complete with photos of Deirdre's ridiculous gate blocking my family's access road. 3 neighbors publicly demanded refunds of illegally collected fees. County Commissioner Holloway, smelling political gold, issued a statement supporting property rights for our brave military families. The state environmental agency released a press statement about frivolous complaints and their commitment to prosecuting false reporting. But instead of backing down, the public attention made Deirdre completely unhinged. She hired some strip mall attorney to send me a cease and desist letter demanding I stop harassing her by, I'm not making this up, exercising alleged property rights in a threatening manner. The texture of that legal threat felt cheap in my hands. Discount paper, rushed printing, the kind of document you get from lawyers who advertise on grocery store bulletin boards. This woman was panicking, and panicked people make catastrophically stupid decisions. She was about to hand me the ammunition I needed to completely destroy her suburban dictatorship. The breakthrough came at 2:47 a.m. on a Thursday, when I couldn't sleep and decided to dig deeper into the county records online. The blue glow of my laptop screen mixed with the smell of cold coffee as I hunted through public documents like a detective following breadcrumbs. Sometimes insomnia is a gift, especially when you're hunting financial predators. Sarah had mentioned during our strategy session that divorce settlements often contain bizarre financial clauses, so I decided to peek at Deirdre's divorce proceedings. What I found in those court documents made everything click into place like the final piece of a 1,000-piece puzzle. Deirdre's divorce wasn't just messy. It was a financial time bomb with a very specific countdown timer. Her settlement agreement required her to maintain her property value above $400,000 to continue receiving $3,200 monthly alimony payments from her ex-husband. If the assessed value dropped below that threshold for more than 6 months, the alimony stopped permanently, and she'd owe him back payments totaling $67,000. Here's the gut punch. Her property had been appraised at $398,000 just 18 months ago. She was literally $2,000 away from complete financial disaster, and the next county assessment was scheduled for October, 3 months away. But it gets so much worse. The divorce documents revealed that Deirdre already owed her ex-husband $180,000 in delayed support payments that she was supposed to have made during their separation. Her fancy McMansion was mortgaged above current market value, and foreclosure proceedings had quietly started 3 months ago. She had exactly 90 days to bring her mortgage current or lose everything. This woman wasn't a powerful suburban dictator. She was drowning in debt and frantically grabbing at anything that might save her. Then I found the smoking gun buried in her mortgage paperwork. Lakefront access rights and water views can boost rural property values by 15 to 30% in our county. Deirdre didn't just want my shoreline for power, she needed it to artificially inflate her property assessment above the $400,000 alimony threshold. Every piece of her elaborate con game suddenly made perfect sense. The fake HOA, the road manipulation, the aggressive community management empire, it was all a desperate scheme to claim control over lakefront assets she didn't own, padding her property value with stolen resources. I kept digging, the texture of court papers crackling under my fingers as I photographed page after page of evidence. She'd been using neighbors' road fees to make minimum mortgage payments and cover basic expenses. That $2,100 monthly collection wasn't community improvement. It was the only thing standing between her and a cardboard box under a bridge. Her professional property management business was really just organized theft disguised as suburban governance, collecting enough cash to survive while executing her master plan to steal my inheritance. The scheme had 3 phases. Plan A was harassment and legal pressure to force me to sell cheap. Plan B was adverse possession if I stayed overseas long enough, claiming abandoned property through continuous occupation. Plan C was getting the county to declare my land abandoned so she could buy it at a tax auction for pennies on the dollar. She'd already contacted development companies about subdividing my lakefront. Phone records from the divorce proceedings showed calls to Northwoods Premium Properties, discussing upcoming waterfront acquisition opportunities and high-value development potential. This revelation completely flipped the script. Deirdre wasn't some powerful enemy crushing the little guy. She was a panicked woman facing financial annihilation, desperately trying to steal enough value to avoid losing her designer lifestyle and fancy house. Her aggressive tactics weren't strength. They were the thrashing of someone whose elaborate house of cards was collapsing. Every threatening letter, every fake fee, every fraudulent lien was actually evidence of how terrified and weak her position really was. I didn't need to destroy Deirdre anymore. I just needed to protect my rights, document her crimes, and let her finish destroying herself. But I wasn't going to just sit back and watch her hurt more innocent people. This woman had stolen from elderly neighbors and attacked my military reputation with lies. Time to help her complete her own destruction, with a little professional guidance. Armed with the knowledge that Deirdre was essentially a financial cornered rat, I knew it was time to stop reacting and start strategically dismantling her operation. But I wasn't going to do this alone. Every good military campaign needs reliable allies and a solid battle plan. First ally, Sarah Justice, my attorney neighbor who'd been chomping at the bit to legally demolish our neighborhood dictator. The smell of fresh legal briefs and determination filled her home office as we mapped out our multi-pronged assault. Sarah would handle the property law side, filing a quiet title action to establish clear ownership once and for all. Here's something most people don't know. A quiet title action is basically a legal process that forces everyone to put their cards on the table regarding property ownership. It costs about $2,000 but eliminates fake claims forever, kind of like getting a restraining order against bogus paperwork. When someone's clouding your deed with fraudulent liens and made-up assessments, this nuclear option cuts through all the bullshit and establishes legal reality. Second ally, Gladys Morrison, the elderly neighbor who'd almost fallen for Deirdre's power of attorney scam. Turns out, Gladys had been quietly saving every document, every fake invoice, every threatening letter Deirdre had sent over the past 2 years. More importantly, she had the original 1960s easement documents showing the historical road access agreements that predated Deirdre's arrival by 40 years. Third ally, Mike Patterson from the bait shop, whose business revenue had tanked thanks to Deirdre's gate fees. Mike knew every weekend fisherman from the Twin Cities, and they were all furious about being charged for public lake access. He agreed to organize them as witnesses for our eventual legal showdown. Fourth ally, County Commissioner Janet Holloway, who was facing re-election and desperately needed to resolve this property rights controversy before voters had their say. Janet wasn't just politically motivated. She was genuinely pissed that some suburban transplant was making her county look like a corrupt backwater where property theft was tolerated. Fifth ally, Army JAG Captain Rodriguez, who was absolutely furious about Deirdre's false mental health claims and ready to provide character testimony that would obliterate her credibility. Military lawyers don't forget when civilians attack their soldiers with fabricated psychiatric accusations. Our legal strategy had multiple moving parts, like a well-coordinated military operation. Sarah would file the quiet title action to establish clear ownership, then request a temporary restraining order preventing any further interference with my property rights. We'd also countersue for damages including lost use of my land, attorney fees, and defamation over her social media character assassination. Meanwhile, I'd report her business license violations to the State Revenue Department. Operating property management without proper licensing equals $10,000 fine per violation in Minnesota, and she'd been running her illegal empire for 2 years. The math was about to get very expensive for our suburban criminal. On the financial intelligence front, we'd use legal discovery to subpoena her bank records, proving she'd been pocketing community fees instead of maintaining any legitimate accounts. Sarah explained that misappropriation of funds collected under false pretenses can trigger both civil liability and criminal fraud charges. For community organization, we planned a neighborhood meeting at Mike's bait shop, neutral ground where people could speak freely without Deirdre's surveillance cameras recording everything. The goal was documenting all fees paid, cataloging services never received, and gathering witness statements about her intimidation tactics. I spent 3 days creating a detailed timeline of Deirdre's illegal activities, complete with photographs, recordings, and witness statements. The sound of my printer working overtime filled the cabin as I assembled evidence packets for the county attorney, State Revenue Department, and civil court. Here's another knowledge nugget I'd learned during military contracting oversight. When someone's operating an unlicensed business and collecting fees under false authority, every single transaction can be considered a separate violation. That means Deirdre's monthly fee collection from 7 families over 2 years equals 168 potential business license violations at $10,000 each. The penalties alone could exceed $1.6 million. The technical preparation phase involved hiring a professional surveyor to install permanent boundary markers, eliminating any confusion about property lines. Those bright orange survey stakes would make it crystal clear where my land began and Deirdre's fantasies ended. I also established a temporary access route through willing neighbor Tom Justice's property, ensuring I couldn't be trapped by any future gate shenanigans. Legal easements are funny things. Once they're properly documented, even new property owners can't eliminate them. Sarah connected me with a veterans legal aid organization that agreed to help fund the case as a precedent setter for military families facing property disputes. This wasn't just about my land anymore. It was about establishing that civilians can't steal from deployed service members with impunity. The final preparation step was setting up documentation systems to record every move Deirdre made going forward. Trail cameras, audio recordings, certified mail receipts, everything admissible in court and organized for maximum legal impact. As I sat on my grandfather's old porch that evening, watching the sunset paint Lake Thornton gold and listening to the distant sound of loons calling across the water, I felt ready for whatever desperate measures Deirdre might attempt. She was about to discover that stealing from a combat engineer's family was the biggest mistake of her pathetic criminal career. If I thought assembling my legal strike team would make Deirdre back down, I severely underestimated how desperate and unhinged a person facing financial ruin could become. Within 48 hours of our neighborhood meeting at Mike's bait shop, she launched the most vicious and personal attacks I'd ever experienced outside of actual combat zones. First came the private investigator. I spotted him Tuesday morning, some greasy-looking guy in a beat-up Honda sitting in the public boat launch parking area with a telephoto lens pointed at my cabin. The smell of his cigarettes and cheap cologne drifted across the water as he tried to look inconspicuous while photographing my every move. Turns out Deirdre had hired this bottom feeder to gather evidence of unstable behavior and potential criminal activity. She was literally paying someone to stalk me, hoping to find anything she could twist into supporting her narrative about the dangerous veteran. But that was just the opening move. By Wednesday, she'd escalated to outright bribery. I heard through Mike's fishing network that she'd approached the county road supervisor with a consulting fee of $5,000 to make her road access changes permanent and lose the paperwork about proper public notice requirements. Thank God the supervisor was an honest guy who immediately reported the attempted bribe to his boss. But it showed just how far Deirdre was willing to go. She was literally trying to buy county officials to legitimize her property theft. Thursday brought a new level of character assassination. She started spreading rumors about my military service, claiming I'd been dishonorably discharged for psychiatric reasons, and that my deployment stories were stolen valor fabrications. The texture of printed-out Facebook screenshots felt slimy in my hands as neighbors showed me the lies she was posting in local community groups. She even filed false police reports claiming suspicious activity at my property, alleging I was running some kind of drug operation or weapons cache. 3 different times, sheriff's deputies had to waste their time investigating completely fabricated claims from our suburban sociopath. But the physical harassment was getting worse, too. She'd installed industrial-strength floodlights pointed directly at my cabin windows, programmed to activate every time a leaf moved. The constant strobing at night was like living inside a prison yard, designed to prevent sleep and drive me away through sheer exhaustion. The sound of her riding mower at 5:30 a.m. became my new alarm clock as she started lawn maintenance during my sleep hours, knowing I was still adjusting to civilian time zones after 3 years overseas. She'd blast country music from outdoor speakers while her landscaping crew dumped construction debris to block my alternative access route through Tom Justice's property. Then came the most devious move yet. She started removing my surveyor's stakes, claiming they were damaging her scenic views and creating safety hazards. Every morning, I'd wake up to find another boundary marker missing, forcing me to pay for repeated surveyor visits to reestablish my property lines. But here's where Deirdre made her first critical mistake. While I was dealing with her escalating harassment, I was also methodically documenting every single illegal action with timestamps, photographs, and audio recordings. Minnesota is a one-party consent state, which meant I could legally record any conversation where I was present. My military training had taught me that the best defense against psychological warfare is staying calm and gathering intelligence while your enemy loses control. So while Deirdre was burning through her remaining cash on private investigators and bribery attempts, I was building an ironclad case for both civil and criminal prosecution. The mini twist that changed everything came when her hired private investigator actually contacted me directly. Turns out this guy still had some professional ethics buried under his sleazy exterior. During our conversation at a coffee shop in town, the aroma of fresh roasted beans mixing with his nervous sweat, he revealed that Deirdre had asked him to plant evidence of drug activity on my property. She'd specifically requested that he find a bag of marijuana near my cabin and photograph it as proof of criminal behavior. When he refused to manufacture evidence, she'd threatened to stiff him on payment and report his vehicle as suspicious to police. This PI wasn't winning any Citizen of the Year awards, but even he drew the line at framing a veteran with planted drugs. He provided me with recordings of Deirdre's requests, clear evidence of criminal conspiracy to file false police reports and obstruct justice. Meanwhile, the community pressure was building. Sarah had organized 3 families to file formal complaints about Deirdre's fee collection with the state attorney general's office. Mike's bait shop became unofficial headquarters for the Restore Lake Thornton movement, with weekend fishermen posting photos of Deirdre's illegal gate fees on social media. The smell of autumn leaves and wood smoke should have been comforting as October approached, but instead it felt like the calm before a massive storm. Deirdre was running out of time before her property assessment and mortgage deadlines, which meant she was about to get even more desperate and dangerous. I could feel her next move coming, something big, something reckless, something that would finally give me all the ammunition I needed to destroy her completely. With her property assessment deadline just 6 weeks away and foreclosure breathing down her neck, Deirdre made the tactical decision to go full nuclear. If she was going down, she was apparently determined to take me with her through the most elaborate smear campaign I'd ever witnessed outside of a political election. Her opening salvo was a media manipulation masterpiece. She contacted Channel 7 News from Minneapolis, claiming to be a concerned community leader dealing with a mentally unstable veteran who's threatening peaceful families. She'd somehow convinced them to do a remote interview about PTSD violence in rural communities and the failure of military mental health support systems. The smell of hairspray and camera equipment filled the air outside her McMansion as the news crew set up for her performance. She'd dressed like a soccer mom attending a PTA meeting. Cardigan, pearls, the whole innocent suburban victim costume. Her fake tears were Oscar-worthy as she described feeling terrorized in her own community by someone with extensive military weapons training. But that was just the warm-up act. She'd also created a professional-looking website called Citizens Against Military Violence, with my photo prominently displayed under headlines like "Dangerous Veteran Threatens Lake Community" and "When PTSD Becomes Everyone's Problem." The site featured fabricated testimonials from concerned neighbors, most of whom didn't actually exist. She'd posted fake witness statements, claiming I'd threatened her with specialized combat techniques, and alleging that my property contained a dangerous weapons cache that could threaten public safety. She demanded the county condemn my land as a public safety hazard and force me into immediate psychiatric evaluation. The character assassination reached its peak when she filed a formal complaint with the VA claiming I needed emergency intervention before someone gets killed. She'd apparently spent hours researching veteran suicide statistics and PTSD symptoms, crafting a detailed report that made me sound like a ticking time bomb ready to explode. Her financial desperation drove her to even more outrageous tactics. She actually approached a Twin Cities property development company, offering to sell them exclusive development rights to what she claimed was soon-to-be-available premium lakefront property. She was literally trying to sell my land to developers before she'd even stolen it. The most audacious move was her attempt to refinance her property using fake community assets as collateral. She'd created fraudulent financial statements claiming her Willowbrook Estates Management Company controlled $2.3 million in community infrastructure and lake access rights. When the bank requested documentation, she provided completely fabricated HOA bylaws and property agreements. Then she tried one last desperate gambit, a direct financial offer. She showed up at my door with a cashier's check for $50,000, claiming she wanted to resolve this misunderstanding amicably, and offering to buy my property as is for immediate closing. The paper felt legitimate in my hands, but I knew she didn't have 50 cents to her name, let alone 50 grand. During that surreal conversation on my front porch, the autumn wind carrying the scent of dying leaves and her desperation-induced perfume, she actually tried to convince me that selling would be the patriotic thing to do, since it would support local economic development and create jobs for working families. My methodical response was everything she wasn't expecting. While she was spinning elaborate lies for media consumption, I was coordinating with my legal team to provide facts, documentation, and character witnesses to anyone who'd listen. Sarah had contacted the TV news producer, providing my complete military service records, which showed an exemplary career with multiple commendations and 0 disciplinary actions. Captain Rodriguez from JAG sent a formal letter to the station explaining the criminal nature of filing false military reports and threatening legal action for defamation. I'd also submitted a detailed complaint to the VA about Deirdre's fraudulent mental health claims, complete with recordings of her demands for psychiatric evaluation. Military medical privacy laws are serious business, and filing false reports about veteran mental health can result in federal charges. The mini twist that sealed her fate came when I discovered she'd been contacting my mortgage company, claiming my property was illegally occupied and that I had no legal right to the land. She was trying to trigger a mortgage default by convincing my lender that my deed was fraudulent. That crossed a line from harassment into financial fraud. My mortgage company immediately reported her interference to their fraud investigation unit, and suddenly Deirdre was facing federal banking crime charges on top of everything else. The community had completely turned against her by this point. When Channel 7 News showed up to film their story, they found Mike's bait shop filled with neighbors ready to testify about Deirdre's illegal fee collection and intimidation tactics. The reporter quickly realized they'd been fed a completely false narrative. Instead of the dangerous veteran story Deirdre had pitched, they ended up investigating suburban woman's elaborate property theft scheme. The segment aired 3 days later, featuring interviews with my neighbors, my attorney, and military officials, all contradicting every single claim Deirdre had made. As November approached and her foreclosure deadline loomed, I could practically smell her panic mixing with the cold autumn air. She was out of tricks, out of money, and about to face the consequences of 2 years' worth of criminal behavior. The public confrontation was inevitable now. She'd made this about community safety and veteran mental health, which meant the final showdown would need witnesses, media, and law enforcement present. Time to give her the public platform she'd demanded, and let her destroy herself in front of everyone. The monthly county commission meeting on November 15th was standing room only, which never happened unless somebody was fighting about taxes or trying to ban something. Word had spread through the lake community that the Willowbrook estate situation was finally going to be resolved, and everybody wanted front row seats for what promised to be the ultimate suburban showdown. The smell of old coffee and nervous anticipation filled the cramped conference room as local residents packed into folding chairs and lined the walls. Channel 7 News had their camera crew positioned near the front, along with reporters from 2 newspapers who'd been following the story since my military service angle went viral on social media. I arrived early with my team, Sarah Justice carrying a thick binder of legal documents, Mike Patterson representing the affected business community, Gladys Morrison clutching her manila envelope of Deirdre's fraudulent paperwork, and County Commissioner Janet Holloway looking like she was ready to personally throw someone in jail. Deirdre made her entrance 20 minutes late, striding through the door like she owned the place, flanked by some nervous-looking attorney who kept adjusting his glasses and checking his phone. She'd dressed for battle in a power suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum floor with each confident step. The county attorney was present, along with a sheriff's deputy and, this was the detail that made my day, an investigator from the State Revenue Department with a laptop full of evidence about unlicensed business operations. Commissioner Holloway called for public comments on property access disputes in the Lake Thornton area, and Deirdre immediately stood up, her voice projecting with practiced authority. "Thank you, Commissioners. I'm here today representing the law-abiding families of Willowbrook Estates, who have been terrorized for months by an individual with documented mental health issues and a history of violent threats." She opened her binder of evidence, the same fabricated documents and edited security footage she'd been pushing for weeks. Her attorney nodded along nervously as she demanded the county protect innocent families from this dangerous individual and declare his property abandoned due to improper legal documentation. For 10 minutes, she painted herself as the victim of a military veteran's psychological breakdown, complete with fake financial records showing her professional community management and testimonials from concerned residents who mostly didn't exist. Then County Attorney Michael Brennan, no relation despite the name, stood up and dropped the hammer that changed everything. "Thank you, Ms. Hutchinson. Before we continue, I need to inform you that this county has completed a criminal investigation into fraudulent business practices in the Lake Thornton area. Your alleged HOA was never legally formed, and you've been operating an unlicensed property management business while collecting fees under false pretenses. The color drained from Deirdre's face faster than water down a drain. Her attorney immediately started shuffling papers and whispering urgently in her ear, but she was too shocked to listen. Furthermore, the county attorney continued, we've received evidence of attempted bribery of county officials, filing of fraudulent liens, and conspiracy to file false police reports. The state attorney general's office has recommended criminal charges in this matter. That's when I stood up with my own presentation. No shouting, no dramatics, just calm, professional delivery of facts that destroyed every lie she'd told. Commissioners, I'm Marcus Brennan, and this is my property deed, signed by my grandfather in 1987 and recorded with this county for 35 years. I held up the original document, its edges worn but the legal text crystal clear. Here are the surveyor's reports confirming my exact property boundaries. Here are recordings of Miss Hutchinson attempting to bribe county officials and requesting that a private investigator plant evidence on my land. Here are bank records showing she's stolen over $25,000 in fraudulent fees from my neighbors. The mic drop moment came when I presented the divorce court documents, revealing her financial desperation. Miss Hutchinson isn't a community leader protecting anyone. She's a woman facing foreclosure who tried to steal my family's land to avoid losing her house. Every fee she collected, every lie she told, every fake document she created was part of an elaborate scheme to commit property theft while I was serving overseas. The room erupted as neighbors started standing up to share their stories. Mike testified about lost business revenue. Gladys revealed the attempted power of attorney scam. 3 families demanded refunds of illegally collected fees. Deirdre's attorney stood up and quietly announced he was withdrawing from the case, effective immediately. Professional lawyers don't stick around when their clients are about to be arrested for multiple felonies. The sheriff's deputy stepped forward and served Deirdre with a warrant for fraud investigation. The state revenue agent presented citations for $47,000 in business license violations. Commissioner Holloway announced a county task force to prevent future fraudulent HOA schemes. As the meeting ended and camera crews swarmed for interviews, I watched Deirdre stumble out the door, her designer heels catching on the threshold as her perfect suburban dictator fantasy crumbled into criminal charges and financial ruin. The little guy had just beaten the corrupt system, and everybody in that room knew justice had finally been served. The aftermath of that county commission meeting moved faster than a Minnesota spring thaw. Within 48 hours, county crews had removed Deirdre's illegal gate, hauling away her fake stone pillars and electronic monitoring system like they were dismantling a carnival that had overstayed its welcome. The sound of heavy machinery and diesel exhaust filled the air as they restored the simple dirt road my grandfather had used for 35 years. Watching that $2,000 gate get loaded onto a flatbed truck felt like exhaling after holding my breath for 6 months. Pure relief mixed with the satisfaction of watching justice steamroll suburban tyranny. Deirdre's legal troubles cascaded exactly as Sarah had predicted. She pleaded guilty to fraud charges rather than face a jury trial, agreeing to pay $23,000 in restitution to neighbors she'd robbed plus $12,000 in court costs. Her McMansion entered foreclosure within 30 days, and she slunk back to a Minneapolis apartment complex where she belonged, her suburban dictator dreams permanently demolished. The community healing happened surprisingly fast once the toxic influence was removed. We formed a legitimate road maintenance cooperative with transparent accounting, voluntary contributions, elected leadership, and public financial records available online. Mike Patterson's business bounced back within 3 weeks as weekend fishermen returned, no longer terrorized by gate fees and interrogations. Property values actually increased 8% once word spread that our area was HOA-free. Turns out people will pay premium prices for lakefront peace without self-appointed rulers demanding tribute every month. I spent the following months restoring my grandfather's cabin with neighbor volunteers who showed up every weekend with tools, beer, and their own stories about defeating petty authority. The texture of fresh sanded wood and smell of linseed oil brought back childhood memories, and I finally felt genuinely home. But the most meaningful outcome was Operation Homecoming, my scholarship fund for military families facing property disputes while deployed overseas. We provide legal assistance, connect families with veteran-friendly attorneys, and cover surveying costs to protect property rights from scammers. The numbers speak for themselves. We've helped 47 military families in 18 months, recovered $340,000 in stolen property value, and shut down 12 fraudulent HOA operations across 6 states. Sarah Justice coordinates our legal network, Mike Patterson handles fundraising through fishing tournaments, and County Commissioner Holloway secured state grants that quadrupled our budget. Our Know Your Property Rights website hits 25,000 monthly visitors researching HOA legitimacy and fighting property theft. Here are the 3 key takeaways everyone should know. First, verify any HOA through state business registrations before paying fees. Most are completely fake. Second, document everything with photos, recordings, and certified mail when property disputes start. Third, professional surveys cost $800, but can save $80,000 in legal fees when boundaries are challenged. The annual Lake Thornton Veterans Appreciation Festival now draws 3,000 people for fishing tournaments, barbecue competitions, and property rights seminars. The sound of live music mixed with children's laughter proves that communities thrive when bullies are eliminated and normal people can enjoy their property without harassment. Our success inspired state legislation requiring public notice for road access changes and doubling penalties for fraudulent property management. Local prosecutors used our documentation to shut down copycat scams across Minnesota, protecting hundreds of families from Deirdre-style theft operations. My personal victory felt complete when I married Sarah Justice in a lakefront ceremony last fall, surrounded by the community that chose justice over corruption. Gladys Morrison served as honorary grandmother, Mike provided the fish fry, and my Army buddies flew in to celebrate on the property I'd fought to save. The deeper mission continues as I help veterans nationwide fight property disputes while they're serving overseas. Operation Homecoming operates in 12 states with plans for national expansion, because every deployed service member deserves to know their family property is protected from civilian predators. 3 weeks ago, I got a call about a situation that makes Deirdre look like an amateur. A city council in Ohio is trying to seize a veteran's farm through eminent domain for a private golf course development, but they made one crucial mistake. They forgot about an 1800s mining rights clause that might blow up their entire scheme. That story's coming next week. As I sit on my grandfather's restored porch each evening, watching loons call across the peaceful lake and listening to gravel crunch under neighbors' trucks heading home from honest work, I'm reminded that David still crushes Goliath when he knows the law and refuses to be intimidated. Drop a comment with your HOA nightmare story. I feature the best ones in our legal education materials and sometimes help fight back. Hit subscribe to HOA Stories for more tales about ordinary people demolishing corrupt systems, because justice doesn't happen by accident. It happens when good people refuse to back down from suburban dictators. The American dream is still worth fighting for, one property deed at a time.
From all of us here at HOA Stories, thanks so much for watching today's HOA Karen Meltdown. If you enjoyed seeing neighbors stand their ground and karma catch up, smash that like button, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you won't miss the next HOA drama we bring you.